Tampa sucks, 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 Tampa sucks. Tampa sucks. Tampa sucks. Let's get into it. Tampa sucks. Let's just get out the gate and lead with that. Tampa, unfortunately, sucks. But it didn't always suck. Now, before we get into my explanation of why a city that I love, a city that I grew up in, a city that I was raised in, I want to give you a little bit of background on who I am so I can establish some credibility. So my name is Trey. As I mentioned, I am a Tampa native. I was actually born in St. Petersburg, Florida, Pinellas County, in December of 1991. And shortly after that, my parents decided to move us to Tampa. And they moved us to a neighborhood in Tampa called Carrollwood. If you know Carrollwood, if you know Tampa, it's suburbia. Prime real estate in the early 90s. And it's where everybody wanted to be. They were leaving South Tampa. They were leaving the Tampa city limits and they wanted to experience something else. And that's what Carrollwood was. It was always Carrollwood versus Town and Country versus Brandon. And then, you had some of the surrounding areas like Lutz and whatnot that were always popular. But Carrollwood in the 90s was where you wanted to be. And so that's where my family ended up establishing our roots. I ended up going to elementary school in downtown Tampa. And then once my elementary school days were over, I begged my parents to please take me out of private school and let me go to public school up in North Tampa, which is where all my friends lived. And that's where I lived as well. So I wanted to be around them. They ended up folding and letting me go to Martinez Middle School. So I went to Martinez. And then in high school, I ended up going to Gaither. So I went to Gaither High School for a few years. And then I ended up getting recruited for football at Hillsborough High School. So I am a Hillsborough High School grad. That matters a lot to people from Tampa, what school you went to. Like, I don't know why. It's almost like a rite of passage. Like if somebody told me that they went to Plant, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, you were spoiled, you were a rich kid. If somebody tells me like, oh, I went to Lato or I went to Middleton, it means like you were scrappy and like, you didn't grow up as privileged as somebody like me that grew up in North Tampa. So it's a real like, and that's just Tampa. Like the people that are from Tampa, you know what I mean. If somebody tells you what high school they went to, you know how they grew up. So I don't even know if that type of mindset exists anymore in Tampa just because I haven't lived there in so many years. But yeah, I'm a Tampa native through and through. And so the only reason why I even left Tampa in the first place, this is kind of going off track, but my girlfriend at the time, I graduated high school in 2010, if that lets you know how old I am. So I got accepted into University of Florida, Florida State University, Florida Atlantic, pretty much all the state schools I got accepted into. And I really wanted to go to either the University of Miami or the University of Central Florida. I did not want to go to USF. And so the only reason why I left to go to school in a completely different state was because my girlfriend at the time like cheated on me and it broke my heart. And I was like, man, I got to get out of Tampa. Like I have to get out of Florida altogether. So I went to college in a completely different state. And then when I graduated college in 2014, I knew I didn't want to come back to Tampa. The only reason why I came back to Tampa was so I could be with my parents because I hadn't been with them in so long. And so I moved back into my house with my parents. And ended up moving out to Southern California and had a great time doing that. Completely different place from Tampa. It's a real metropolis, right? Los Angeles, Orange County, all of the valleys, the San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley. It's very different than anything in Tampa or really anything in Florida in general. And so that was my first real awakening and by the way, I went to school in Chicago. So getting a chance to see another metropolis, so one metropolis to another metropolis. So at this point, I'm like, okay, these are great places and very, very different from Tampa. And look, since moving to Southern California in 2014, right, I've lived in South Florida. So I came back to Florida. I lived in South Florida. I lived in Boca. Then we moved out to Hawaii. Then I moved to Germany. And then I came back here to Florida once my marriage came to an end. And so I knew I didn't want to be in Tampa, but I came back to Tampa anyways because I had hoped that it had at least remained the same somewhat. And this is where I want to talk about why Tampa sucks and just my understanding of what the city has become and where the city is headed. And I'm going to be honest, it's not really in a direction that I like seeing Tampa headed in because I had always held Tampa to a much higher standard than the rest of the cities in Florida because I've always viewed Tampa as being like the real Florida, not Miami, not Fort Lauderdale, not Orlando, and not Jacksonville. It was always just the real, genuine Floridian city. And I know that's going to trigger some people, but let's be real. It doesn't have much to fall back on. There's beaches, but there's not really even any beaches in the Tampa city limits. You got to go to St. Pete, you got to go to Clearwater. Sure, Tampa's along the coast, but geographically speaking, it's not along the coast. So that's just something that I think a lot of people, when they move to Tampa, they expect it to have beaches and they expect it to just be some tropical oasis. And sure, while it is that, no, there are really no beaches in Tampa minus Ben T. Davis Beach, which I'm just going to be honest, I'm pretty sure I lost my virginity at Ben T. Davis Beach. It's just a beach where you go to clap cheeks, smoke weed, maybe drink a little bit, and like it's just that type of place. It's not a family-friendly beach. Sorry if that hurts to hear, but it's the truth. So when I left Germany in 2023, I came back to Tampa, and obviously, like, I didn't want to be here, but I really, really tried hard to give Tampa a chance. And one of the first things that I noticed was just one, how much traffic there was, which that's Florida in general, but I had always known that there was bad traffic in Florida, but I'm telling you, the traffic that I had seen was unlike anything that I've ever seen. First off, insane amount of construction being done. And I'm talking construction that had been being done when I left to move out to Southern California way back in 2014. The same construction, just amplified. So it's like, what are we doing here, right? Tampa has already had an incredibly lousy infrastructure. You know, it's a very car-centric city. But now, for some reason, they just want to absolutely obliterate any chance for Tampa to be a pedestrian-friendly city. And sure, I know some people are going to say, well, Trey, there's walkways along the Riverwalk and all of this stuff. And while that stuff is great, right, because the Riverwalk, well, the new Riverwalk was not a thing when I grew up in Tampa. Like, you used to see people doing crack down there. You'd see some drug deals. You'd see some homeless people, having sex and whatnot. That was it. So this new Riverwalk that a lot of people see in Tampa now is still a very new age concept to anybody that grew up in Tampa in the 80s, the 90s, and even the early 2000s. It just was not a thing at all. And pedestrianism is virtually non-existent in Tampa. And it's very unfortunate because it's a beautiful city. And I think a lot of it should be seen on foot. So pedestrianism shot in Tampa. And I really don't see or foresee any plans to improve on it, right? Because they're just continuing to expand 275. They're expanding that I-4 corridor right there, going around as you're going into downtown Tampa. They're not going to expand 7th Ave and Ybor. They're not going to expand, Hyde Park Village. They're really not creating like pedestrian-friendly areas. And in fact, they're building more parking garages in downtown Tampa. And this was back in 2023, and they're continuing to do the same thing now. So if you're wanting to come to a city where you can like walk around and have a good time and be safe, sadly, you're going to need a car in Tampa. And so my very first order of business was just traveling around Tampa and like figuring out where I wanted to live. I'm going to tell you right now where I didn't want to live. I didn't want to live in suburbia. I wanted to be somewhere centralized where there was a nightlife, where there was a lot of food, in a place that I could run. Because some of you, are new to the channel, but I run. I'm a long distance runner. And so maybe somewhere like South Tampa where I can access Bayshore Boulevard, or, I was maybe even considering Ybor because I know that area had gone through heavy gentrification, right? And I know that because I could look at the rent prices and see that there's no way that the original people that lived here would be able to afford these newer, higher prices, much higher prices that I had been finding on Zillow, Redfin, etc. Even working with some of my friends that work in real estate and decided to stay in Tampa, like they would actually tell me like, "Hey Trey, you should maybe consider looking at Ybor." And I'm like, "Where? Ybor? You're talking about the place where people get shot?" And like, it's a wild place. It used to be the Wild Wild West. And a lot of people don't realize this too. Nebraska Avenue back in the day, you couldn't even drive down that street after 9 p.m. unless you were looking for hookers, you were looking for drugs, or you were just looking to like die. That's what Nebraska Avenue was back in the 90s and back in the early 2000s. And of course, like they've come through and cleaned it up and tried to clean it up. And like, let's just admit it, it's heavy, heavy gentrification. And let's just be honest for a second. Tampa is just a heavily gentrified city. The Tampa that I grew up in, like we used to have a lot of pride and shotgun houses. And like we used to love our cigar factories, which is where they used to roll the Arturo Fuente cigars. And, there were just numerous historical sites. And when I came back to Tampa in 2023, I had noticed that a lot of them had been destroyed and replaced, and not replaced by anything useful, right? They were replaced by like a Sprouts grocery store or a parking lot or a parking garage, but nothing else. No soul, no character, just nonsense, just corporatized capitalist bullshit. And I don't have any issue with capitalism. I don't want to make this a political thing. But it's like if you're going to replace it with something, at least make it useful, right? You're putting a parking garage there. And when I drive into that parking garage, if I don't see any cars in there, what was the point of putting a goddamn parking garage there? And, you got rid of something that was beautiful. Why? And look, I know West Tampa gets a bad rep, right, as being an unsafe place. But for me, a lot of my friends are from West Tampa. A lot of like the best people that have ever come out of Tampa come from West Tampa. And if you go through West Tampa now compared to going through it in the 90s, it's just completely different. There's no character. They've they've torn down a lot of the houses. They're talking about putting the Rays there, which I actually don't mind. I think that's a good idea. I think St. Pete needs a little bit of a break when it comes to traffic, and they just don't have any space. And it was very unfortunate what happened to the, Tropicana Field. But I do think that the Rays belong in Tampa. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But West Tampa, basically non-existent from the West Tampa that I grew up with. Which brings me now to Water Street. So Water Street, for as long as I've been alive, has always been called Channel Side, right? So Sparkman's Wharf, whatever the hell you call it now, it's just Channel Side to me. And by the way, I call all Tampa landmarks their original names: Ice Palace, Channel Side, Ice Palace, Channel Side, end of story. That's it. I don't call them Amalie Arena. I don't call it Sparkman's Wharf. It is Channel Side, Ice Palace, Cope, Seethe, Cope. So, and I know my friends are going to get a real kick out of watching this video. But so my friends and I, when we used to go out, when we finally reached 18, right, we started out in Ybor. And then once we got over Ybor, we wanted to explore other areas. And so that other area was Channel Side. There was a nightclub there at the time called Asia, which was incredible. It was like, it just felt good being in there. It was very nice, great music, great atmosphere. And that was really it. There was a couple of, high rises in the area that were apartments. There was the aquarium. Then there was Channel Side, and that was it. There was really nothing else except just grass. But I liked that. Now there is something called Water Street, which, don't get me wrong, I love Water Street. It's a beautiful place. I will admit, though, it's a sad reminder of what Tampa used to be, which is the Tampa that I love and is now no more. My issue with Water Street is that it just has no soul, and it's not uniquely Tampa. And the issue that I have really with it is that it feels like I'm in Brickell in Miami, or it feels like I'm in Midtown in Miami. So it's like the goal of every city should be to have its own unique identity. And here's why I feel like Tampa really sucks, is because we've had all these outside, influencers and all these, foreign companies come in that have loved Miami, right? And now they're doing something where they're like trying to Miami Tampa, and they're trying to like force this real Miami influence in Tampa, which has never existed. And in fact, any real Floridian out there will tell you, like, Tampa and Miami have always been very prideful cities, and we've always respected our differences. So now, why is Tampa now slowly and surely trying to become Miami? It's not right, and something needs to change. And look, as a Tampanian, I'm gonna call this shit out every time I see it, which is a lot. And that's honestly probably the real reason why I just don't like going to Tampa anymore, is because it just doesn't feel like Tampa. And I know for a lot of people that grow up places and return, it's not the same. But even in like places like New York, for example, a lot of people stay because they love it and there's a real sense of nostalgia there. Or even Chicago, or even Dallas and Houston, and even in Miami. But now Tampa, there's no real identity. I drive around there. Don't get me wrong, I drive a nice car, but it's just different. You see Lamborghinis every few minutes. You see G-Wagons, Mercedes-Benz S-Classes, and I get it, right? All the people with money from up north and from California and from Texas came during COVID, brought their money with them. But the issue that I have with that is those people came and they didn't embrace Tampa. They did everything they could to change my home. And I don't agree with that. Because, right, when I went to Southern California, or when I went to Hawaii, or even when I went out to Germany, right, I didn't try to change any minds. I just tried to embrace it. And there were some times where it was hard, like Hawaii, for example, right? Island fever and becoming acclimated to being in the Hawaiian Islands. But I loved it. And I loved my time there. And looking back on it, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. The issue that I'm seeing with people that come to Tampa, they're constantly complaining, oh, why can't I find this? Why can't I find good pizza? There's no good Chinese food. I'm from New York. I expect these, the pizza sucks in Florida. Back in Jersey, the fucking pizza's great. It's about the water. It's this, it's that. I can't get a good pie here. Or, I can't do this. I can't do that. Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, blah, blah. Nobody asked your ungrateful ass to come here. Why are you complaining? It's like me going to China, right, and complaining that there's no good American soul food there. What the hell do you expect when you come here? And here's the issue that I have too. There's great pizza here in Florida. I will die on that hill. There's great Chinese food. There's great hoagies. There's great things that people find in their homes, but they're just too freaking lazy. You're too freaking lazy to find it. And then it just magically becomes Tampa's fault. And then these people tell their friends, then those complainers come here, and then those complainers tell their friends, and then those complainers come here. And then what do you have? You just have so much ungrateful people in one place. It's very low energy. It's, Tampa just does not need that negativity. Like I said, it wasn't a perfect place ever by any means, but it was pretty damn close. And I just remember Tampa having a real sense of pride. And sadly, it's like I see that disappearing because of the amount of negativity, foreign influence, transplant influence of people coming here and trying so hard to make this city something that it's not. They're trying to make it Philly. They're trying to make it Boston. They're trying to make it New York. They're trying to make it, LA. This is not those places. This is Tampa. Deal with it. Another thing I wanted to talk about real quick as to why I just feel like Tampa is just going down the toilet is the insane cost of living. It's almost like going back to, trying to Miami, my Tampa. Tampa is really trying to bridge the gap with South Florida when it comes to, rent prices and home prices, overall home prices. And I genuinely don't understand why that is. And look, I think Tampa's a great place. But if we're being honest, as far as like nicer place, like just more things to do, obviously Miami's that place. So that's why homes are usually more expensive there. So I'm genuinely trying to understand why this gap is closing between the two cities. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And sure, Tampa's got 3 amazing professional sports teams. the Bucks, the Lightning, the Rays, and now they're talking about even starting an MLS team there. But the prices are just absurd, with the median average rent price for a 1-1 in Tampa hovering between $2,300 to $2,500 a month. Why? Why on earth is it that much? Now we're talking about getting up there with like Los Angeles, Seattle, not quite San Francisco, but certainly over Atlanta, and right there with Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Miami-Dade, Broward County. They're like neck and neck almost for rent prices. But people are just continuing to move to Tampa. And look, I'm telling you, I know there's some articles coming out about how, oh, people are leaving Tampa in droves and there's this like huge exodus away from the Tampa Bay area.
That's right, because recently Pods had Tampa on its top cities that people are moving to. But now, for the first time ever, Tampa finds itself on the list of cities that people are now leaving in the year 2025.
I know Trump says fake news all the time. It is blatantly obvious fake news, because even if you just look at, let's say, South Tampa, for example, there's nothing available. There's no good homes available. If you look at St. Pete, everything is like double the price of what it should be, and sometimes even triple the price of what it should be. And I know the political stuff is happening in other cities and it's pushing people to come here to Florida. It's just so damn expensive to own and to rent in Tampa. Busch Gardens is great. The Florida Aquarium is incredible. And honestly, Tampa's #1 saving grace, and I'm sad because I never fly out of here because I don't live there and I never fly into there, but it's Tampa International Airport, aka TPA. It is just the nicest airport ever. I've got global entry, but every time that I've either flown from Europe back into Tampa, like I never have any issues coming in, to the country or flying into the airport. And every time that I've left, like I never even have to use global entry because there's never any lines. And I'm talking about like in December, and it's just such a nice, beautiful airport. It is literally the crown jewel of all things Tampa. And while the food is great in Tampa and the Tampa Bay area, I do think that the food is better in South Florida, including Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach. And I do think that the food is actually better in Orlando. I think that Tampa does have great food though, like I said, but it's just still sadly behind to those other two cities. Jacksonville, you're not even a real place, in my opinion. And here's another way I can tell you that Tampa has just gone through a real metamorphosis from hell, in my opinion, is people now consider Ulele to be like the #1 restaurant in Tampa. Why? There are so many other places that don't rely on influencers to tell you to go there. And, not everything needs to be like Instagrammable and Instagram friendly and TikTok friendly. The food is average at best. Now, where I will say people are right on, but this has just been known since like the 60s in Tampa, is Burns is still the GOAT. Like when it comes to just great restaurant experiences in Tampa, you got to put Burns up at the top. Argue amongst yourselves. So people, with everything being said, quit Philadelphiaing my Tampa, quit New Yorking my Tampa, quit trying to LA my Tampa. Don't Houston, don't Austin, don't Dallas, don't Chicago, don't Ohio my Tampa, don't Detroit my Tampa. Just please come here and embrace it. Final warning. Now, I do think that there are some very positive things happening in Tampa. I think the Gasworks project, while it's sad to see, so much history essentially flattened, right, by new development and whatnot, I do think that it's a pretty exciting project, right? It's going to stretch all the way from downtown Tampa all the way out to Ybor. So that will be pretty exciting to see. I do think that there are going to be some downsides that come with that. Increased traffic, more concrete being poured. And by the way, I'm part of the movement. It's not like an actual movement, but like keep Florida, Florida, right? Like there doesn't need to be concrete everywhere. But sadly, that's just sort of the direction that Tampa's heading in. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. I can talk about it as much as I can, but this is just something that Tampa has adopted. They are going to develop. They're going to overdevelop. And Gasworks is literally like the epitome of that. So it is what it is. But I think it'll be cool to see once it's done. Now, you all are probably wondering, Trey, what do you want to see Tampa become in the future? My answer is very simple. I really think there needs to be a real shift in focus towards creating pedestrian-friendly areas throughout the Tampa Bay area. Downtown Tampa, Carrollwood, Town and Country, moving out to Brandon, moving into Ybor, moving down to South Tampa, even heading into like St. Pete and, Clearwater. There just needs to be a real shift in focus towards eliminating the vehicle from the equation and making sure that people are on their feet enjoying this beautiful place. That's one thing. And number two, I really, and while some people might think this is, trying to Miami Tampa, I really think there needs to be a shift in focus towards like the arts and music, because Tampa is a beautiful place and there's so many different areas to go and see, and so many empty buildings where businesses can thrive. Restaurants, art venues, music exhibition halls, just places where people can come and be happy and feel good. That's the Tampa that I remember. So look, guys, something's got to change. I got freaking Jane Castor's business card sitting in my wallet over there. I need to give her a call because I'm just, I don't even go to Tampa anymore because it's just like such a sad place to me. It's just not what Tampa used to be. That doesn't mean all hope is lost, though. Because while all these developments are taking place and all these new projects are happening throughout Tampa, I really feel like Tampa can get back to at least having a soul. Because right now, it just has none. It has no real identity. It's lost, unfortunately. And I don't know what the formula is besides overdevelopment and just, transplants coming here and changing the true identity of Tampa. And it's really, really sad to see. So look, I really hope that this video doesn't come across as somebody trying to be an edgelord and just trying to talk shit about people coming to Tampa. If you want to come to Tampa, come. But please, whatever you do, just embrace it because it really is a great place. And if you can't find something, like I'm literally opening up my DMs to you all to ask me where you could find something good. Like I'm just considering myself to be like the unofficial mayor of Tampa, even though, Jane, if you're watching this, no disrespect, I love you. But yes, please, there's great things in Tampa. You just have to search. You have to find them. And it's not hard to do. So as always, if you guys got any value from this video, if you're new to my channel, I highly recommend that you subscribe. We do some weird, funny, cool, unique things. I'm working on a project right now that I think everybody's going to enjoy. So look out for my next video after this one. But yeah, until then, unfortunately, Tampa, you suck. Do better, be better, get better. And if you're coming to Tampa, please embrace it. It's a truly great place. Golden, Daddy loves you. Thank you all for the continued love and support. Thank you. Mahalo for watching. I need a Cuban sandwich.